My name is Caspian Reeves. I am 31 years old, and I work as a marketing coordinator for Pinnacle Construction, a mid-sized commercial building company in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Tempe, in a complex called Desert Palms that was built in the early 2000s and caters to young professionals who work in the tech corridor between Phoenix and Scottsdale. My apartment is on the second floor, has a small balcony overlooking the community pool, and is furnished with the kind of practical, unremarkable furniture that you buy when you are more focused on functionality than style. I drive a used Toyota Camry that I bought 3 years ago from a dealership in Mesa, and I maintain the kind of steady, unremarkable lifestyle that most people would consider successful for someone my age and educational background. Every weekday morning, I wake up at 6:15 to the sound of my phone alarm, brew coffee using a programmable machine that I bought on sale at Target, and spend the first hour of my day checking work emails while eating breakfast and watching the local news. My commute to work takes 40 minutes on a good day, longer when there are accidents on Interstate 10 or construction delays on the surface streets that connect Tempe to downtown Phoenix. I listen to podcasts during the drive, mostly business and marketing shows that help me stay current with industry trends and professional development strategies. I park in a covered garage beneath our office building, take the elevator to the 7th floor, and spend my days in a cubicle that faces east toward the airport and the distant mountains that surround the Phoenix metropolitan area. From the outside, my life looks exactly like what a college-educated millennial professional is supposed to achieve. Stable employment with a company that has been growing steadily for the past decade, decent benefits including health insurance and a 401k plan with employer matching, manageable student loan payments that will be finished in 7 more years, and enough disposable income to afford a gym membership, cable television, and occasional dinners at restaurants that do not require me to check my bank account balance before ordering an appetizer. I have colleagues who respect my work ethic and creativity, a supervisor who appreciates my reliability and my ability to translate complex construction concepts into marketing language that appeals to potential clients, and a small group of friends who know me as the guy who always shows up on time, never causes drama at social gatherings, and can be counted on to help with moving furniture, driving people to the airport, or providing emergency pet care when someone goes out of town. What none of them know is that my carefully constructed adult life is built on a foundation of loss and abandonment that has shaped every decision I have made since childhood. What none of them understand is that beneath my professional competence and social reliability lies a deep, persistent longing for the father I never knew and the family connection that was stolen from me before I was old enough to understand what I had lost. I grew up believing that my father, David Reeves, had died in a construction accident when I was 3 years old. According to my mother, Linda Reeves, he had been working on a high-rise office building in downtown Phoenix when scaffolding collapsed during a windstorm and sent him falling 8 stories to his death. She told me that he had been a hard-working man who loved his family, who had been excited about being a father, and who had been looking forward to teaching me about construction and engineering when I got older. "Your daddy was so proud of you," Mom would tell me when I asked about him during my childhood, usually when I saw other kids with their fathers at school events or little league games. He used to come home from work every day talking about the house he was going to build for us, about the workshop he was going to set up in the garage so he could teach you how to use tools and fix things. He had so many plans for the two of you. Mom would show me the one photograph she had kept of my father, a slightly blurry picture taken with an old film camera, showing a man in his late 20s wearing a yellow hard hat and work clothes, standing in front of a construction site with his arm around my mother's shoulders. In the photo, Mom was holding me as a baby, probably around 6 months old, and Dad was smiling down at both of us with what looked like genuine pride and affection. His face was partially obscured by shadows from the hard hat, but I could see that he had dark hair, strong hands, and the kind of weathered skin that comes from working outdoors in the Arizona sun. He was the strongest man I ever knew, Mom would say, running her finger along the edge of the photograph with a tenderness that suggested she still missed him deeply even years after his death. Not just physically strong, although he was definitely that, but strong in his heart, strong in his commitment to doing the right thing. He would have done anything to protect us, to provide for us, to make sure we had everything we needed to build a good life. According to Mom, Dad's death had been sudden and devastating. The kind of workplace accident that changes everything in an instant and leaves families struggling to understand how their lives could be destroyed so quickly by circumstances completely beyond their control. She said that the construction company had paid for his funeral and had provided a small death benefit to help with immediate expenses, but that there had been no ongoing financial support for his widow and young child. "I was only 24 when your father died," Mom explained during one of our conversations about family history when I was in high school, working on a family tree project for my American history class. "I did not know anything about insurance policies or legal rights or how to fight big companies that do not want to pay what they owe to the families of workers who die on their job sites. I was just trying to survive and take care of you, trying to figure out how to be a single mother when I had never expected to raise a child alone." Mom worked a series of jobs throughout my childhood and teenage years, each one a step toward better wages and more stability, but none of them providing the kind of financial security that a two-parent household might have achieved. She waitressed at family restaurants and sports bars, cleaned houses for wealthy families in Scottsdale, worked as a cashier at various retail stores, and eventually found employment as an administrative assistant at a small law firm in Tucson, where we had moved when I was 5 years old so that Mom could be closer to her parents and have help with childcare. She never remarried, despite having opportunities to date men who seemed interested in building relationships with both her and me. She never seemed to seriously consider the possibility of bringing a stepfather into our family, and when I asked her about it during my teenage years, she would give answers that suggested she was still emotionally connected to my father's memory in ways that made it difficult for her to imagine loving someone else. "Your father was the love of my life," she would say when I asked why she did not date or why she seemed uninterested in the men who occasionally asked her out. I know that might sound old-fashioned or romantic in a way that does not make practical sense, but I cannot imagine feeling about anyone else the way I felt about him. Besides, you have been my priority for all these years. Making sure you had what you needed to succeed has been more important to me than finding a husband. Mom focused all of her emotional energy on raising me and making sure I had opportunities she had never been able to access herself. She had dropped out of high school when she became pregnant with me, and she had never gone to college or developed the kind of professional skills that might have led to higher-paying careers. But she was determined that I would have different choices and different possibilities. "Your education is the most important thing," she would tell me throughout my childhood and teenage years, especially when I complained about homework or expressed frustration with teachers who seemed demanding or unfair. "Your father wanted you to go to college, to have choices that he never had. He grew up in a family where nobody went to college, where all the men worked construction or manufacturing jobs that were hard on their bodies and did not pay enough to build real financial security. He would be so proud to know that you are going to accomplish things that neither of us could have imagined." I was a good student, partly because I was naturally curious and enjoyed learning, but mostly because I understood that academic achievement was the only way I could honor my father's memory and justify the sacrifices my mother had made for my benefit. I studied hard, earned good grades throughout elementary and middle school, participated in extracurricular activities like student government and academic clubs, and applied for every scholarship and grant available to first-generation college students from low-income families. The guidance counselor at my high school, Mrs. Patricia Rodriguez, took a special interest in my college planning and helped me navigate the complex application and financial aid processes that my mother was not equipped to handle herself. Mrs. Rodriguez had grown up in a similar situation, the daughter of immigrant parents who had not attended college, and she understood the challenges that first-generation students face when trying to access higher education. You have the grades and test scores to get into good schools, Mrs. Rodriguez told me during one of our meetings in the spring of my junior year. But you are also going to need significant financial aid, and that means you need to apply strategically to schools that have strong financial aid programs and that actively recruit students from backgrounds like yours. I was accepted to Arizona State University with a combination of merit scholarships, need-based grants, and federal student loans that covered tuition, room and board, and most of my other educational expenses. I majored in business with a focus on marketing and communications, partly because I was genuinely interested in the field, but mostly because I thought it would provide stable career opportunities in a variety of industries. I chose marketing because I enjoyed writing and was good at understanding how to communicate with different audiences, skills that had developed during high school when I had worked on the school newspaper and helped with promotional materials for various school events. I also chose marketing because it seemed like a field where creativity and analytical thinking were both valued, and where I could potentially work in industries that felt connected to my father's memory. During college, I lived in residence halls for the first 2 years, then moved to a shared apartment with 3 roommates for my junior and senior years. I worked part-time jobs throughout college to help cover living expenses and to reduce the amount of money I would need to borrow. I worked in the university bookstore, delivered pizzas on weekends, and spent 2 summers working as an intern at small marketing firms in Phoenix. College was the first time in my life that I had been away from my mother for extended periods, and the independence gave me opportunities to think about family history and identity questions that I had not explored while living at home. I occasionally wondered about my father's family and whether I had grandparents, aunts, uncles, or cousins who might be interested in having a relationship with me, or who might be able to provide information about my father's personality, interests, and family background that my mother could not share. When I asked Mom about Dad's relatives during my college years, usually during phone calls or visits home, she would give vague, inconsistent answers about family members who had lived in other states, relatives who had died before I was old enough to remember them, and complicated family dynamics that had made it difficult to maintain contact after Dad's death. "Your father's family never approved of our marriage," Mom would say when I pressed for specific information about grandparents or other relatives. "They thought I was not good enough for him, that I was too young and too uneducated to be a suitable wife for someone with his skills and work ethic. When he died, they blamed me for the accident because I had been pressuring him to work more hours and take on extra projects so we could make more money for the baby. But would not they want to know their grandson?" I would ask, unable to understand how family members could hold grudges that were strong enough to override their interest in having relationships with their dead son's child. "Would not they want to have a relationship with me even if they had problems with you? Some people are too bitter and angry to think clearly about what is best for children." Mom would reply, her voice carrying sadness that suggested she had been hurt by their rejection. "Your father's family decided that it was easier to pretend we did not exist than to deal with the complicated emotions of grief and regret and blame. I tried to reach out to them after the funeral, but they made it clear that they did not want any contact with me or with you." I accepted these explanations because I had no reason to doubt my mother's honesty about family relationships, and because I was busy with college coursework, part-time jobs, and social activities that kept me focused on building my own life rather than dwelling on relationships with people who apparently did not want to know me. I figured that if my father's family wanted to find me, they would make the effort to do so. If they were not interested in having a relationship with me, then I would focus on creating my own family through friendships and eventual romantic relationships rather than pursuing people who might not want to be pursued. After graduation, I moved to Phoenix permanently and started looking for entry-level marketing positions with companies that offered opportunities for professional development and career advancement. I was particularly interested in working for companies in industries that felt connected to my father's memory, such as construction, architecture, or real estate development. I applied for positions with several construction companies, architectural firms, and real estate agencies, and I was offered a job as a junior marketing associate with Pinnacle Construction, a company that specialized in commercial buildings, office complexes, and retail developments throughout the Southwest. The position involved creating marketing materials, maintaining the company website, managing social media accounts, and assisting with trade show presentations and client communications. I accepted the position because the work seemed interesting and challenging, because the salary was competitive for an entry-level marketing job, and because I was attracted to the idea of working in an industry that had been my father's career and passion. Even though I would not be working on construction sites the way he had, I felt like contributing to the marketing and business development side of the construction industry was a way of honoring his memory and connecting with the work that had been important to him. My first day at Pinnacle Construction was Monday, August 15, 2020, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when most companies were still adjusting to remote work protocols and safety measures for employees who needed to work in offices. I reported to the 7th floor of a downtown Phoenix office building, where I was introduced to my supervisor and the other members of the marketing team. My direct supervisor was a woman named Jennifer Martinez, who had been with the company for 8 years and who managed all marketing and communications activities for Pinnacle Construction. Jennifer was in her early 40s, had a background in journalism and public relations, and immediately impressed me with her knowledge of the construction industry and her ability to explain complex technical concepts in language that would appeal to potential clients and business partners. Marketing in the construction industry is different from marketing consumer products, Jennifer explained during my first week on the job. Our clients are making decisions that involve millions of dollars and multi-year commitments. They want detailed information about our capabilities, our track record, and our approach to project management. They are not interested in flashy advertising or emotional appeals. They want facts, data, and evidence that we can deliver what we promise. The overall leader of Pinnacle Construction was a man named Theodore Brennan, though everyone in the office called him Theo. He was the company president and founder, a man in his 50s with graying hair and the kind of weathered hands and confident bearing that suggested he had worked construction jobs before moving into management and business development. Theo was known throughout the company for his expertise in commercial construction, his ability to manage complex projects involving multiple contractors and regulatory agencies, and his leadership style that balanced high expectations with genuine concern for employee well-being and professional development. During my first few weeks at Pinnacle Construction, I interacted with Theo primarily during staff meetings and company presentations, where he would discuss ongoing projects, new business opportunities, and strategic planning for the company's growth and development. He seemed to take particular interest in the marketing team's work, and he would often ask detailed questions about our strategies for reaching potential clients and communicating the company's capabilities and values. Marketing is not separate from the construction work we do, Theo would say during team meetings. Marketing is part of how we build relationships with clients, how we demonstrate our commitment to quality and reliability, and how we differentiate ourselves from competitors who might offer lower prices but cannot match our expertise and track record. About 3 months into my employment at Pinnacle Construction, Theo began spending more time working directly with the marketing team on specific projects and strategic initiatives. He would visit our department several times a week, review the materials we were developing, and provide feedback and suggestions based on his decades of experience in the construction industry. Caspian is developing a good understanding of our business, Theo told Jennifer during one of their conversations about my work performance, a conversation that I overheard while working at my desk nearby. He asks the right questions, and he seems to grasp the technical aspects of what we do without getting overwhelmed by the complexity. I appreciated Theo's recognition of my efforts to learn about the construction industry, and I worked hard to justify his confidence in my abilities by reading industry publications, attending webinars and conferences, and asking questions of experienced colleagues who could help me understand the nuances of commercial construction and project management. Over the months that followed, Theo and I began working together more closely on marketing projects that required detailed knowledge of construction processes, client relationships, and industry trends. He would invite me to attend client meetings and site visits, where I could observe how experienced professionals communicated with architects, engineers, and property developers about project requirements and timeline expectations. Understanding construction requires more than reading about it, Theo explained during one of our site visits to a retail development project in Scottsdale. You need to see how the work actually happens, how different trades coordinate their activities, and how project managers handle the inevitable problems and delays that arise during complex construction projects. These site visits were educational and professionally valuable, but they also felt personally meaningful in ways that I had not anticipated. Walking through construction sites, listening to Theo explain structural engineering concepts and construction sequencing, and observing the skilled work of carpenters, electricians, and other tradespeople gave me a sense of connection to my father's world that I had never experienced before. Your father would be proud to see you learning about the industry that was so important to him. I would tell myself during these site visits, imagining what it might have been like to visit construction sites with Dad when I was a child, to learn about building and engineering from someone who had loved the work and who had wanted to share that knowledge with his son. As my first year at Pinnacle Construction progressed, Theo became more than just my company president and indirect supervisor. He became a mentor who helped me understand not just the technical aspects of the construction industry, but also the business relationships and professional skills that were necessary for career advancement in a field that valued both expertise and personal integrity. Construction is ultimately about relationships and trust. Theo told me during one of our conversations about career development and professional goals. Clients choose contractors based on technical capabilities, but they also choose based on confidence that the contractor will deliver what they promise, when they promise it, and at the price they agreed to pay. Building that kind of trust requires consistency, reliability, and the ability to communicate clearly about both opportunities and challenges. These conversations with Theo reminded me of the kinds of discussions I had always imagined having with my father, conversations about work and responsibility and the satisfaction that comes from using your skills to create something useful and lasting. I found myself looking forward to these mentoring sessions, and I began to think of Theo as the closest thing I had to a father figure in my adult life. During my second year at Pinnacle Construction, Theo began including me in more strategic planning discussions and giving me responsibility for marketing projects that involved direct contact with major clients and business partners. He seemed to trust my judgment and my ability to represent the company professionally, and he would often ask for my input on business decisions that extended beyond marketing into areas like project selection and client relationship management. Caspian has good instincts for this business, Theo told Jennifer during one of their performance review discussions about my work and potential for advancement. He understands that construction is not just about buildings and contracts. It is about solving problems for clients, delivering value that justifies their investment, and building relationships that lead to repeat business and referrals. This recognition from Theo meant more to me than salary increases or job title promotions, because it suggested that I was developing the kind of professional competence and personal character that I associated with my father's legacy. Working in the construction industry, earning the respect of someone like Theo who had decades of experience and success, felt like a way of honoring my father's memory while building my own career and identity. By my third year at Pinnacle Construction, Theo and I had developed a working relationship that felt both professionally productive and personally meaningful. We collaborated effectively on marketing projects and business development initiatives. We communicated easily about complex technical and strategic issues, and we seemed to share similar values about work quality, client service, and professional integrity. You remind me of someone I used to know, Theo told me during one of our conversations about industry trends and career goals. Someone who had the same combination of analytical thinking and genuine interest in the construction process, the same ability to see both the technical details and the bigger picture. I was curious about who he meant, but Theo did not elaborate, and I did not want to pry into personal matters that he might prefer to keep private. I assumed he was thinking of a former colleague or business partner who had influenced his own career development, and I felt honored that he saw similar qualities in my approach to work and professional relationships. Sometimes the people who have the biggest impact on our lives are the ones we work alongside, Theo continued. The people who teach us not just technical skills, but also how to think about responsibility and commitment and the satisfaction that comes from doing work that matters. Over the 3 years I had been working at Pinnacle Construction, Theo had become the most important professional relationship in my life, but also something more than that. He was a mentor who had helped me understand the complexities of the construction industry, a professional advocate who had made sure I received recognition and advancement opportunities, and something like a father figure who seemed genuinely interested in my personal well-being as well as my work performance. "Do you have family in Phoenix?" Theo asked me during one of our conversations about work-life balance and long-term career goals, topics that had become more relevant as I approached my 30s and began thinking about marriage, homeownership, and other major life decisions. "Just my mother in Tucson," I replied, as I always did when people asked about family. "My father died when I was young, and I do not have contact with other relatives." "That must have been difficult," Theo said, his expression becoming serious and sympathetic in a way that suggested he understood the impact of growing up without a father. Growing up without a father leaves gaps that are hard to fill, especially for boys who need male role models and guidance. "It was difficult," I agreed, appreciating his understanding and empathy. "But my mother did her best to provide everything I needed, and I have been fortunate to work for people like you who have been willing to teach me things that fathers usually pass down to their sons." Theo smiled at my comment, but I noticed that his eyes seemed to contain sadness or regret that I could not quite understand. "Sometimes life presents opportunities to fill those gaps in unexpected ways," he said thoughtfully. "Sometimes the family connections we need find us when we are ready to receive them." I thought about that conversation many times over the following months, wondering what Theo had meant by family connections finding us when we are ready, and whether he was hinting at something specific about mentorship, professional relationships, or personal connections that I had not yet understood. Last Tuesday, October 10th, 2023, everything changed in a way that revealed the truth about my father, my family, and the lies that had shaped my entire life. I was in my office reviewing marketing materials for a new commercial development project that Pinnacle Construction was hoping to win, a mixed-use complex in Chandler that would include retail space, office buildings, and residential units. The project represented a significant opportunity for our company, and I was working on a comprehensive proposal that would demonstrate our capabilities and competitive advantages to the development group that was selecting contractors. Around 10:30 in the morning, my assistant Jennifer Martinez knocked on my door with an expression of concern and urgency that immediately told me something serious had happened. "Caspian, I need to tell you about an accident involving Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice shaking with worry and stress. "What kind of accident?" I asked, immediately concerned about Theo's well-being and safety. "A serious car accident on Interstate 10, Jennifer explained, sitting down in the chair across from my desk. He was driving to a client meeting in Tucson when another driver ran a red light at a highway intersection and hit his car at full speed. The paramedics had to use the jaws of life to extract him from his vehicle, and they transported him to Banner University Medical Center with what they are describing as life-threatening injuries. I felt a surge of panic and concern that surprised me with its intensity. My immediate thought was not about work responsibilities or project deadlines, but about getting to the hospital to make sure Theo was receiving the medical care he needed and to provide whatever support I could offer during his recovery. "How serious are his injuries?" I asked, already reaching for my car keys and jacket. The paramedics told his wife that he has a severe head injury, multiple broken bones, and internal bleeding, Jennifer said. "They are not sure yet whether he is going to survive, but they said the next few hours will be critical." I drove to Banner University Medical Center immediately, not thinking about anything except the possibility that I might lose the most important mentor and father figure in my adult life. During the 40-minute drive from downtown Phoenix to the hospital, I found myself thinking about all the conversations Theo and I had shared about construction, business, and life goals. I thought about the pride I had seen in his eyes when I succeeded at challenging projects, and the concern he had shown for my personal and professional development. Most of all, I thought about how much Theo's guidance and support had meant to me during the 3 years since I had started working at Pinnacle Construction, and how devastated I would be if I lost him before I had the chance to fully express my gratitude for everything he had taught me. When I arrived at the emergency department, I was directed to a family waiting area where several other Pinnacle Construction employees had already gathered. Theo's wife, Margaret Brennan, was there with their adult daughter, Patricia, both of them looking frightened and exhausted by the stress of waiting for medical updates about someone they loved. Margaret was a woman in her late 40s with graying hair and the kind of composed bearing that suggested she was accustomed to handling crisis situations with grace and determination. Patricia was probably in her mid-20s, worked as a teacher at an elementary school in Tempe, and had obviously rushed to the hospital from her classroom because she was still wearing the colorful, child-friendly clothing that elementary teachers often choose for their work environments. "How is he?" I asked Margaret when I approached the family area, feeling somewhat uncertain about whether I belonged in this intimate space reserved for Theo's closest relatives and personal friends. "The doctors are still evaluating his injuries and determining what surgical procedures will be necessary," Margaret replied, her voice strained with emotion but still carrying the kind of strength that comes from years of experience managing difficult situations. "He has a severe traumatic brain injury, several broken ribs, a punctured lung, and significant internal bleeding. They are going to need to operate immediately to stop the bleeding and reduce swelling in his brain." "Is there anything I can do to help?" I asked, wanting to be useful during this crisis but uncertain about what kind of assistance would be appropriate or meaningful. "Anything you need me to handle at the office, or any family members you need me to contact, or any other support I can provide?" "Thank you, Caspian," Margaret said, reaching out to squeeze my hand in a gesture that seemed both grateful and somehow familiar. "Theo always talks about how much your work and friendship mean to him. He would be glad to know you are here, and he would appreciate your concern for his well-being." Something about Margaret's tone and the way she looked at me suggested that she knew more about my relationship with Theo than I would have expected from casual workplace conversations. She seemed to be speaking with the kind of personal knowledge that comes from detailed discussions about specific individuals, rather than the general awareness that spouses typically have about their husbands' professional relationships. We waited in the hospital family area for several hours while Theo underwent emergency surgery to repair internal injuries and reduce swelling in his brain. The surgical team included a neurosurgeon, a trauma surgeon, and several other specialists who were working together to address the multiple injuries he had sustained in the collision. During the waiting period, I had opportunities to talk with Margaret and Patricia about Theo's interests, his approach to business and family relationships, and his reputation within the construction industry. These conversations helped me understand aspects of Theo's personality and background that I had not learned through our professional interactions. Theo loves the construction industry because he believes that buildings are more than just structures. Margaret told me during one of our conversations about his career and business philosophy. He thinks that construction work is about creating spaces where people can live their lives, build their families, and pursue their dreams. Every office building, retail center, and residential development represents opportunities for human connection and community building. He also loves mentoring younger people who are just starting their careers, Patricia added. He always says that the most satisfying part of his work is helping people develop skills and confidence that will serve them throughout their professional lives. These comments about Theo's interest in mentoring reminded me of the unusual amount of time and attention he had devoted to my professional development, and the personal interest he had shown in my career goals and life plans. Most supervisors and company presidents did not invest so much energy in individual employees, especially junior-level staff members who were still learning the basics of their industries. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Dr. Patricia Chen, the neurosurgeon who had led Theo's surgical team, came to the family waiting area to provide an update on his condition and prognosis. The surgery was successful in stopping the internal bleeding and reducing pressure on Mr. Brennan's brain. Dr. Chen explained, speaking with the kind of careful precision that medical professionals use when delivering information about serious injuries and uncertain outcomes. However, he lost a significant amount of blood during the accident and the surgical procedures, and his condition remains critical. We are going to need to provide blood transfusions to stabilize his circulation and support his recovery. What do you need us to do? Margaret asked immediately, clearly prepared to take whatever steps were necessary to support Theo's medical treatment. We need to determine his blood type so we can match him with compatible donors, Dr. Chen said. We have his medical records from previous treatments, but we also like to verify blood type information with family members when possible, since blood type is genetic and immediate family members often share compatible types. I can give blood if he needs it, Patricia offered without hesitation. I am his daughter, so there is a good chance we have compatible blood types. I can give blood too, I said, speaking before I had really thought about whether my offer made practical sense. I am not family, but if you need additional donors, I am willing to help however I can. Dr. Chen smiled at my offer with the kind of warm appreciation that medical professionals show when people volunteer to help during emergencies. That is very generous, and we may indeed need multiple donors depending on how much blood Mr. Brennan requires for his recovery. We would need to test your blood type first to make sure you are compatible, but any donation would be helpful for our blood bank supplies. What blood type does he need? I asked, motivated by genuine concern for Theo's well-being, but also by curiosity about medical procedures and compatibility requirements. Mr. Brennan has type AB negative blood, Dr. Chen said. It is a relatively rare blood type, found in less than 1% of the population. We are checking our blood bank supplies, but we may need to locate specific donors if we do not have enough AB-negative blood available for his treatment. Something about the mention of AB-negative blood type triggered a memory that I could not quite place. I felt like I had heard that specific combination before, in a context that was important but that I could not immediately recall. The feeling was similar to the experience of hearing a song on the radio and knowing that you had heard it before, but being unable to remember when or where or what associations it carried. Can you test my blood type anyway? I asked Dr. Chen. Just in case I am compatible? Or in case you need donations for other patients? Of course, she said. Any blood donation would be helpful, even if it turns out that you are not a direct match for Mr. Brennan. We can always use additional supplies for other patients who need transfusions. A nurse drew blood from my arm and sent it to the hospital laboratory for typing and compatibility testing. I expected the results to show that I had a common blood type like O positive or A positive, and that I would not be able to donate directly to Theo but might be able to contribute to the general blood bank supply that helps other patients in need of transfusions. I spent the waiting time thinking about Theo's condition and prognosis, about the surgery he had undergone and the recovery process he would face if he survived his injuries. I also found myself thinking about my father and the construction accident that had taken his life when I was 3 years old, and about the parallels between workplace safety issues in the construction industry then and now. 30 minutes later, Dr. Chen returned to the family waiting area with laboratory results that would change my understanding of everything I thought I knew about my identity, my family, and the relationships that had shaped my adult life. Mr. Reeves, she said, looking at the laboratory report with an expression of surprise and professional interest. Your blood type is AB negative. You are a perfect match for Mr. Brennan. AB negative, I repeated, trying to process the significance of that information and the implications it might carry. The same rare blood type that less than 1% of people have? Exactly the same, Dr. Chun confirmed. It is quite a remarkable coincidence. You would be able to donate blood directly to Mr. Brennan if we need additional donors beyond our current blood bank supplies. But even as Dr. Chun was explaining the blood type compatibility and the donation procedures, my mind was racing with questions and memories that suddenly seemed much more significant than they had before. I remembered a conversation I had with my mother when I was in high school, when I had needed to provide medical history information for a sports physical examination required for participation in the school's cross-country running team. "What is my blood type?" I had asked Mom while filling out the health forms that the school required for athletic participation. "AB negative," she had said without hesitation, as if the information was something she had memorized and referenced many times before. "Same as your father. It is a rare type, so you should remember it in case you ever need medical care or want to donate blood to help other people." At the time, I had not thought much about the significance of having a rare blood type. I had simply written the information on the form and filed it away as one of many medical details that adults are expected to remember about themselves. But now, sitting in a hospital waiting room and learning that my boss shared the same rare blood type that my mother had told me I inherited from my father, I was beginning to understand that the coincidence was too extraordinary to be explained by chance. AB-negative blood was found in less than 1% of the population. The statistical probability of two unrelated people with that blood type working together, developing a close professional relationship, and ending up in a hospital situation where blood type compatibility became relevant were so small as to be almost impossible. Unless we were not unrelated. Unless Theo Brennan was not actually my boss, but my father. Unless David Reeves had not actually died in a construction accident when I was 3 years old. I excused myself from the family waiting area and walked to the hospital cafeteria, where I could sit alone and think through the implications of what I had just learned without having to maintain appropriate social behavior in front of Theo's wife and daughter. I found a corner table where I could process this information privately while figuring out what questions I needed to ask and what steps I needed to take to understand the truth about my family history. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. "Mom," I said when she answered, "I need to ask you about something important, and I need you to tell me the truth." "What is wrong, Caspian?" Mom asked, immediately picking up on the urgency and tension in my voice. "You sound upset. Are you hurt? Are you in some kind of trouble? My boss was in a serious car accident today, and he needs a blood transfusion," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and factual despite the emotional turmoil I was experiencing. "When they tested my blood to see if I could donate, they found out that I have the same rare blood type that he has. AB negative, which you told me I inherited from my father." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, the kind of silence that occurs when someone is trying to figure out what to say rather than simply processing surprising information. The silence lasted long enough that I began to wonder if our call had been disconnected. "Mom, are you there?" I asked. "I am here," she said quietly, her voice carrying a tone that I had never heard before, a combination of sadness and fear and what might have been resignation. "Mom, what is the name of my boss?" I asked, though I suspected she already knew the answer. "I do not know the name of your boss," Mom said, but her voice carried the kind of hesitation that suggested she was not telling the truth. "His name is Theodore Brennan," I said. "Theo Brennan. He works in construction, he is in his 50s, and he has AB-negative blood just like the father you told me I inherited mine from." Another long silence. "Mom, what is the name of my boss?" I repeated. "Theodore Brennan," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "So you do know his name," I said. "You know who I work for?" "Yes," she admitted. "I know who you work for." Is Theodore Brennan my father? I asked, stating the question as directly as possible. Caspian, you need to come home, Mom said, her voice now shaking with emotion. Drive to Tucson tonight, and we will talk about this in person. I cannot discuss this over the phone. Just tell me if Theodore Brennan is my father, I said. Tell me if David Reeves actually died in a construction accident, or if you have been lying to me about that for my entire life. Come home, Mom repeated. Tonight. We will explain everything when you get here. Just answer the question, I insisted. Is Theo Brennan my father? Yes, she said finally. Theodore Brennan is your father. I hung up the phone and sat in the hospital cafeteria, staring at my reflection in the window and trying to understand how it was possible that I had been working for my own father for 3 years without either of us knowing the truth. But even as I sat there, pieces of information that had never made sense before were beginning to fit together in ways that suggested the truth was more complicated than a simple case of mistaken identity or hidden parentage. Theo had never seemed surprised by my interest in construction or my understanding of industry terminology and concepts. He had never questioned my ability to communicate with contractors and architects, or my intuitive grasp of project management and client relationship challenges. He had seemed to recognize something familiar in my work style and professional approach from the very beginning of my employment. More significantly, Theo had always seemed unusually invested in my personal and professional development. He had spent more time mentoring me than he spent with other junior employees. He had made sure I received credit for my contributions and opportunities for advancement. He had treated me less like an employee and more like someone he had a personal stake in seeing succeed. And I remembered the sadness in his eyes when I had mentioned growing up without a father, and his comment about family connections finding us when we are ready to receive them. If Theo Brennan was my father, then he had known who I was from the moment I applied for a job at Pinnacle Construction. He had hired me not because of my qualifications or potential, but because I was his son, and he had been looking for a way to be part of my life without revealing the truth about our relationship. But why would he hide his identity from me? Why would he allow me to believe that my father was dead while working alongside me every day and building a relationship that felt like the father-son connection I had always wanted? I returned to the family waiting area, where Margaret and Patricia were still waiting for updates on Theo's condition following his surgery and blood transfusions. I looked at them with new awareness of who they were and what my relationship to them might be, and I noticed details that I had not paid attention to before. Margaret had the same eye color that I had, and the same facial structure around the cheekbones and jawline. Patricia had hands that were shaped like mine, and the same habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she was thinking or concentrating. These physical similarities were subtle enough that I had not noticed them during casual interactions, but they became more obvious when I was actively looking for family resemblances. Mrs. Brennan, I said, approaching Margaret with questions that I needed to ask despite the inappropriate timing and the emotional stress she was already experiencing. Can I ask you about Theo's family history? Of course, Margaret said, looking at me with an expression that suggested my question was not as surprising as it should have been. What would you like to know? Has he ever mentioned having a son? I asked. A son who was adopted or who he lost contact with when the child was young? Margaret looked at Patricia, and I saw them exchange the kind of meaningful glance that suggested they were both aware of information that I had not yet been told. How long have you known? I asked. Theo figured it out about 6 months after you started working at Pinnacle Construction, Margaret said gently, her voice carrying the kind of careful compassion that people use when sharing information that will be emotionally difficult to hear. Your mother had given you his last name originally, but she changed it when you were older to protect your privacy and safety. When Theo saw your job application and learned about your background and family history, he realized who you were. He has been trying to figure out how to tell you, Patricia added. speaking with the kind of sisterly concern that I now understood was appropriate to our actual relationship. He was afraid that if he revealed the truth suddenly, you might think he had hired you just because you were his son rather than because you were qualified for the job. So he knew I was his son from the beginning, I said, trying to understand the timeline and the decision-making process that had led to 3 years of hidden identity and carefully constructed professional relationships. He suspected it from your job application, Margaret explained, but he waited to be certain, and then he spent months trying to decide how to handle the situation without disrupting your career or making you feel manipulated or deceived. Was my mother lying when she told me he died in a construction accident? I asked. Your mother was protecting you from information that she thought would be harmful, Margaret said. When you were 3 years old, Theo was going through some serious personal problems. He was drinking heavily. He had lost his job due to attendance and performance issues, and he was not capable of being a responsible father or partner. Linda thought it would be better for you to believe he was dead than to grow up with a father who was unreliable and potentially dangerous to your safety and well-being, Patricia said. She moved away from Phoenix and changed your last name so that Theo would not be able to find you until he had gotten his life together and proven that he could be the kind of man who deserved to be part of your life. But he did get his life together, I said. He stopped drinking, he built a successful business. He became the kind of person who could have been a good father. He did, Margaret agreed. It took him several years, but he eventually admitted that he had a serious drinking problem, got professional help for his addiction, and rebuilt his career and personal relationships. But by then, you were an adult, and he did not know how to approach you without disrupting the life you had built for yourself. When you applied to work for Pinnacle Construction, Patricia explained, he saw it as an opportunity to get to know you and to prove that he was worthy of being your father. He wanted to earn your respect and affection through his actions rather than demanding it because of biological relationships. He wanted you to choose him as a father figure before he revealed that he actually was your father, Margaret said. He wanted to know that you respected him and trusted him based on his character and his treatment of you, not because you felt obligated to forgive him for the mistakes he made when you were young. I spent the next several hours sitting in Theo's hospital room, watching him sleep and thinking about the relationship we had built over the past 3 years. I thought about all the conversations we had shared about construction and business and life goals. I thought about the pride I had seen in his eyes when I succeeded at challenging work projects, and the concern he had shown for my personal well-being and professional development. I thought about how much I had come to respect and care about Theo as a mentor and father figure, and how much his approval and support had meant to me during the years when I was building my career and my adult identity. Most importantly, I thought about how right it felt to discover that the man I had already chosen as a role model and mentor was actually the father I had been missing my entire life. When Theo woke up the next morning, I was still sitting beside his hospital bed, reading construction industry publications and waiting for him to regain consciousness after the surgery and medical procedures that had saved his life. "Caspian," he said, his voice weak but alert. "What are you doing here?" "I am here because you are my father," I said, "and because I want you to know that I am glad you are my father." Theo's eyes filled with tears, and he reached for my hand with the kind of desperate relief that comes from finally being able to acknowledge relationships and emotions that have been hidden for too long. "I was afraid that when you found out the truth, you would be angry that I had been lying to you," he said. "I was afraid that you would think I had been manipulating you or using our biological relationship to influence your feelings about me." "I am not angry," I said. "I am grateful. You gave me 3 years to get to know you as a person and to decide that I respected you and cared about you before I learned that we were related. That is a gift that most children never receive from their fathers." "I wanted to tell you sooner," Theo said, his voice growing stronger as he became more alert and emotionally engaged in our conversation. But I was afraid that if I revealed who I was too quickly, you would think I was trying to use our biological relationship to manipulate your feelings or your career decisions. You wanted me to choose you based on who you are rather than on what you are, I said. Exactly, Theo replied. And you did choose me. You chose me as a mentor and a friend and a father figure before you knew I was your biological father. That means more to me than you could ever know. Over the next several weeks, as Theo recovered from his injuries and gradually returned to work, we began building a father-son relationship that felt both completely new and surprisingly familiar. We already knew each other well from our professional relationship, so we did not have to navigate the awkwardness of getting acquainted with a stranger. Instead, we could focus on exploring the personal and emotional dimensions of our connection that had been developing naturally over the past 3 years. I also began rebuilding my relationship with my mother, who flew to Phoenix to be present for the conversations about family history and the decisions about our future as a reunited family. I understood why she had made the choices she had made when I was young, and I appreciated the sacrifices she had made to protect me from a father who had not been ready to be a responsible parent. I always hoped that someday you and your father would find each other. Mom told me during one of our conversations about the years of separation and secrecy. But I wanted it to happen when you were both ready to handle the relationship successfully, when you were both mature enough to build something positive together. We were ready, I said. We just did not know we were ready. I also began developing a relationship with Margaret and Patricia, who welcomed me into their family with the kind of warmth and acceptance that made it clear they had been hoping for this reunion as much as Theo had. Margaret told me stories about Theo's recovery from alcoholism and his efforts to build a business and personal life that would be worthy of the son he had lost. Patricia shared memories of growing up hearing about her older brother who lived somewhere in Arizona but whom she had never been allowed to meet. Dad always said that someday we would be a complete family, Patricia told me during one of our conversations about childhood and family dynamics. He never stopped believing that you would come back into his life when the time was right. 6 months later, Theo and I were working together on a construction project that involved renovating an old warehouse into affordable housing units for families with children. As we walked through the construction site, discussing design plans and timeline requirements, I realized that I was finally doing exactly what my father had always planned for us to do together. Working side by side on projects that would create structures where people could build their lives and their families. This is what I always imagined, Theo told me as we watched workers installing energy-efficient windows on the upper floors of the building. Working together on projects that matter, using our skills to create something lasting and meaningful that will serve families for decades. It is exactly what I always wanted too, I said, watching the skilled craftsmanship of electricians and carpenters who were transforming an abandoned building into homes where children would grow up and families would create memories. I just did not know that what I wanted was already within reach. 3 months ago, Theo made me a partner in Pinnacle Construction, with ownership stakes and decision-making authority that reflected both my professional contributions and my status as his son and successor. We changed the company name to Brennan and Reeves Construction, acknowledging both our family relationship and our commitment to building a business that we could pass down to future generations. Last week, I moved out of my apartment in Tempe and bought a house in Central Phoenix, close enough to the office that Theo and I can easily coordinate our work schedules, but also close enough to Margaret and Patricia that we can have regular family dinners and maintain the kinds of relationships that I had always wanted but never thought I would be able to achieve. If you have ever wondered whether the people in your life might be more significant than they appear to be, if you have ever felt an unexplained connection to someone who seemed to understand you in ways that other people do not, then you understand why discovering that Theo was my father felt like finding a piece of myself that I had not even realized was missing. Sometimes the family you need is closer than you think. Sometimes the father you have been searching for has been beside you all along, waiting for the right moment to reveal himself. And sometimes the blood that flows through your veins carries messages that your heart recognizes even when your mind does not understand. The rare blood type that we shared was not just a medical coincidence that saved Theo's life during his accident. It was a genetic signature that revealed the truth about family connections that had been hidden for decades, and that opened the door to relationships that both of us had been hoping to find. Before you go, if this story resonated with you and helped you think about the family connections that might be hiding in plain sight, please consider subscribing to this channel and sharing this story with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Before you go, I have left 2 more stories here on your screen. Both from men who discovered that family is not always who you expect it to be. Sometimes it is who you have been working alongside, learning from, and growing with all along. Click on whichever one calls to you. And if you want to join our community of people who understand what it means to find family in unexpected places, that notification bell is your invitation. Until tomorrow, remember your story matters, and the people who matter most might be closer than you think.